Hey everybody. There's been an extremely positive response to all of my autism videos, especially the ones about autism and limerence and things like that. And I might follow up on that particular topic a little more. I do have some more observations there. But I wanted to talk about something very specific, which is autism as it relates to narcissistic abuse. And I want to tell you about an experience I had. Um, I was 24 going into 25 there at the time that this happened. And so it was about 16 years ago, 15, 16 years ago that this happened. And I want to talk about it now in light of everything that I know since then. So I knew I was on the spectrum. I was diagnosed in college. And if you're just joining us, and I was out of college at this point and was here in the Atlanta area trying to get my career started, trying to get my life started and everything. And I was I was at a place where I was still I knew I was on the spectrum and I had for a while, but I was very reluctant to talk about it, especially back then. Right nowadays, there's a lot more openness about it, and people are a lot more there's a lot more public understanding of autism and what it is. But back then, it seemed to I'd had a lot of experiences where people would find out that I was on the spectrum and would just disassociate from me completely, and would want nothing to do with me. And that's apropos of nothing that would justify them, but nothing specific that would justify them behaving that way. It was just the knowledge that I was on the spectrum. Um, and anyway, so I was very cautious about it, and especially because I was trying to make it in the entertainment industry, and as such, trying to comport myself as a competent and reliable individual and things like that. And I am competent and reliable, but I have to get that across. Anyway, I tell this story with some trepidation because it involves a good deal of embarrassment on my part. But I ask, if you commit to watching this video, please hear it through to the end, because I'm going to give you the uncomfortable, uncertain part of it, and then I'm going to give you the vindication that I later got. So don't worry, it's all going to work out in the end where I'm going with this. I say this because it deals with someone who is trying to make some very false and frankly defamatory accusations against me. And by the way, if you're someone who's a regular viewer of my channel, this is not referring to anyone that you have heard of publicly, not someone with any public persona or anything like that. So I'll thank you. Now I'm keeping names out of this for obvious reasons, and I'll thank you not to try to guess. Anyway, so way back then, I had moved. While in college, I had come to terms with the fact that I just didn't believe in Christianity anymore. I was raised in a Christian environment. I didn't believe in it anymore. Now, since then, in about 2017, late 2017, I actually came back to Christ. And I'm an Episcopal Christian now. But I, for a long time, was just an atheist. And unfortunately, I know atheists hate to hear things like this said. I hated to hear things like this said when I was an atheist. But like a lot of atheists, I was not coming to it from a totally emotionally neutral standpoint. I had a lot of anger towards people within the church. A lot of what I saw as the hypocrisies of the church. I'd lived in very small town Bible Belt parts of the country, and I'd been bullied by people who saw themselves as acting in the will of God and things like that. So I had still not let go of spirituality altogether. at that point, and I got into the occult and witchcraft and the dark arts and all of that. And I think I saw it as, C.S. Lewis described it very well, because he, as a young man, very young man, had a flirtation with the occult as well. And it's odd to think that one of the all-time most important Christian writers of the modern age, if not of all time, could have, if he had gone a different road, he could have, he could have ended up in the same camp as Eliphas Levi and Helena Blavatsky and all of that stuff. But anyway, so C.S. Lewis described it perfectly, though, that the occult, Christianity arouses a feeling of spiritual love. The occult arouses a feeling of spiritual lust, if that makes sense. Like, it's very much, it uses all of the theatrics of religion and all of the pageantry, but there's a lot more vagueness to it, and this feeling of the seductive quality to it, because rather than, if you go into a Christian church and say, what do you believe? They'll say, here's what we believe. It's very, obviously there are Christian cults out there, but by and large, Christian churches, they will just tell you what they believe, and that's that. And it's not a situation where you're, paying money to learn little bits of it, a little bit at a time, and that kind of thing. These things should be things like that should just be regarded for the scams that they are. No legitimate religion requires you to pay money to learn what its basic beliefs and practices are. Obviously, you might have to pay your priest to come officiate your wedding. That's his job. He needs to be paid for his time. But they're not going to, and they will ask for tithes for donations and that kind of thing, but they're not going to charge you, they're not going to tell you that you have to be in the church for years and move up a certain number of degrees and pay a certain amount of money just to learn what in the fuck it is these people believe, that kind of thing. And by the way, I will say I'm going out of my way, like I said, not to use specifics, but I will say, by the way, that it was not Scientology. I realize everything that I just said makes it sound like Scientology. It was not. But anyway, I got into, I was fascinated with LaVeyan Satanism. Rest assured, I am not into that anymore. And the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey is not anything terribly original or insightful. First of all, because nobody actually needs instructions on how to just do whatever the fuck you want with your life all the time, and live a life of consistently shallow self-indulgence. This is not a difficult thing to achieve. Contrary to what a lot of these organizations will tell you, there's not a lot of freeing your mind involved in doing that. It's kind of like you don't have to be very intellectually attuned to sit around and masturbate all day, and that's basically that's basically all it comes down to. But anyway, metaphorically. But anyway, so I was into all of that, and then I got into Satanism is LaVeyan Satanism is atheistic, and so and that is, by the way, that is one of the areas where the areas that first introduced me to, see, the Satanic Bible is it's really just a paraphrasing of Thus Spake Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, so much so that Anton LaVey said that his writing was just Ayn Rand with rituals. And then a lesser-known writer who wrote under the pen name Ron Yar Redbeard, who's was most likely Arthur Desmond, and he wrote a book called Might is Right. And so of the three, that one, Might is Right, is the one that's the least meaningful or interesting to me. I still have an appreciation for Nietzsche and Ayn Rand outside of all of that. But anyway, and for the record, I had read both of them prior to my occult interest. I don't want to make it sound like that was the only place where I was aware of them, but that kind of did fuel my reading them, which was actually beneficial, because all of that helped me move away from all of the occult bullshit. I realized, oh, this is what's really interesting to me. Let me turn my attention to this. But anyway, so a friend of mine was a part of a particular occult organization, and I wanted to be a part of it. He and I were working on a project, a musical project that would have, his lyrics involved a lot of imagery and prose or poetic imagery around these concepts. And I said, well, give me some of your materials so I can read up on it. And he gave me a book to read, and I really enjoyed it. And so I wanted to get involved in the organization. So the organization met once a month for their monthly mass, and he took me to one of the masses, and I really enjoyed it. And you know, they do put on a good show. I mean, they put on a good show. It was a very beautifully done pageant and that sort of thing, or the pageantry was really beautiful, and the whole ceremony was really cool and all of that. And it had, I mean, the whole thing had a kind of an eyes wide shut quality to it. So it was just captivating and fascinating from that angle. And so I was really down. I was interested. There was this guy there who was basically the local leader of this organization. I met him and we talked, and he was really down with everything I was into. He's like, "Oh, Satanism, cool. Do you know about the Temple of Set? Have you know, that kind of thing?" And I will say, by the way, I don't agree with the Temple of Set, but I will say, of all of the left-hand path religious organizations, the Temple of Set, this is just a side note, is about the only one I can still have a modicum of respect for, because they're the ones that don't seem like bullshit artists. I've not spent any serious time with that organization, but they seem fairly forthright. Like they acknowledge, for example, that they have a very high turnover rate. It's something like 80%. I think it's something like 80% of the people there involved in the organization leave within 5 years. And they're very frank about, like, look, nobody stays with this very long. This is a phase in your life you're going through, and you're going to move on. You're going to realize, self-actualize, and move on to bigger and better things. I appreciate that. You know, like I said, I'm not interested in what they practice or anything, or I'm not interested in practicing Sessionism, as it's called, or Setianism, as it's called, or being a part of that. But I at least appreciate that they don't seem to be bullshitting people. I could be wrong, speaking as an outsider. Anyway, that's a side point. But he seemed like a really cool guy, and was much older than me, and you know, as I came to these services every month, he took a very, I guess you could say, almost like fatherly, supportive, you know, what Freud would call the secondary parental or secondary father figure. You know, a mentoring role. That's the word I'm looking for, like a mentoring role to me and everything. And I couldn't say enough good about him. He always made time for me. He always made time to, like, talk to me and tell me all this cool stuff and, like, explain all of these cool occult concepts to me. And he just seemed like such a fascinating, knowledgeable person. I did not realize that I was being love bombed. The first stage of narcissistic abuse is love bombing. And I did not realize that that was what was happening to me. And this is a thing where, you know, when you find out that you are on the spectrum, there's a lot of work you need to do to start learning about the many, many pitfalls of the world. Because, you know, frankly, like James Randi said, you know, no matter who you are, no matter how smart you are, no matter how successful you are, no matter how cosmopolitan and with it you are, no matter how with it you think you are, you can be fooled. And totally neurotypical people, well-functioning, healthy, sane, neurotypical people get suckered in by narcissistic abuse. Because frankly, narcissistic abusers can smell out our emotional weaknesses and start catering to them. And it was very obvious. I was this young man I was a spiritually directionless young man looking for a place of belonging at a kind of vulnerable transitional period of my life. Obviously, it was easy to target me with love bombing. I didn't know that was what was happening. So months went by, and I stayed with the organization, and they wanted me to stay with the organization. They invited me to their Christmas party. Yes, they had a Christmas party. And they, you know, we went to that, and I went to that, and I kept coming to mass. Now, This was something where if you wanted to be a member, you were supposed to join and pay monthly dues. And I had no money for that. And I forget what the exact amount was for dues, but it was something like, if it had been $5 a month, like if it had been the cost of a streaming service or something, I would have said, yeah, sure, fine. But it was not something. I remember hearing what it was. And it's like, yeah, I can't spare that right now. And they were everyone there was like, oh, it's okay, it's okay. You're always welcome to come to mass, and we make exceptions for people all the time. This is not, we make exceptions for people all the time. You're totally welcome to come to this thing. And maybe even have active membership, pursue official membership, even if you can't pay for it. We understand your situation. So again, I'm thinking, okay, cool. Now I want to emphasize, this guy that I'm about to describe this problem with was the one and only person at this organization that I ever had a problem with. Every other person there was totally cool, and it was totally cool, totally nice. I can, I had no real problems with anyone else there that I was feeling. This was the only person that, as far as I'm concerned, I ever had a problem with there. And I emphasize that because I want to be clear that I'm not cracking down on the whole organization, even though I don't agree with it spiritually anymore. I'm not cracking down on the whole thing. I just didn't. I just want to emphasize that it was just him, and I'm not throwing anyone else under the bus. They were nice people. And so as time went on, I'd been going for a while, and many months I've been going. And one day, this woman who was about my age, young woman who was about my age, came to the thing to check it out. And she and I struck up a conversation, and we started talking, and we had just the best conversation the whole time. We were talking and laughing, and like I was not having to do anything to like propel this forward or keep getting her attention or anything. It was like she was just hanging out with me the whole time, and we were just having this great conversation, and it was really nice, and I was really enjoying it. And I was thinking, man, she's really cute, and we're really connecting. And at the time, I didn't have a driver's license at the time. I had not started driving yet. Autism. And so I needed a ride home. I was just going to take the bus home from Mass, but I said, "Do you mind? Can I get can I get a ride from you? I'll spot you for gas." And she said, "Sure." We drove home. Great conversation. Had a wonderful time, and she came in for a minute. I showed her my studio, my home studio at the time, and then I said, "Well, this has been really great. Do you mind? Would you be interested in staying in touch? I think I'm really feeling something here." And it's like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be great." And so she gave me her email address and said, "Yeah, I'll talk to you soon." And so she left, and I made clear that I was romantically interested. There wasn't a confusion about that, about whether or not that's what I was interested in. But she seemed positive about it. So after she left that evening, I sent her a message and said, "Hey, it was really great meeting you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again. And would you want to, could we get some, get a bite to eat sometime or something like that, generic." The next day, I woke up to a message from her that just said, "I'm not interested in you. This ends here and now." To be very clear, the phrase "this ends here and now," I remember that being those are the verbatim exact words. I don't remember the exact words she used at the beginning. It was something to the effect of, "I'm not interested in you. I just want you to know when I'm paraphrasing and when I'm not," since my understanding of social cues is a part of this. Anyway, so I was like, I wrote her back and I just said, "That's totally fine. Do you mind if I ask why?" And I know that, and I didn't phrase it in anything. I didn't. That's literally all I asked was, "Do you mind if I ask why?" Because I was just confused. I was surprised, and the well, let me just go ahead and get to the meat of this. So about 3 months went by and I didn't see or hear from her again. I heard no response. I didn't get anything back. I forgot about it, or just put it out of my mind and moved on. And, by that point in my life, I'd had enough dates and enough experience with women, positive experience with women, to know that I didn't need to hold on to, even though this day we spent together was really nice, I didn't need to hold on to it. If she's not interested, that's fine. So I let it go. And for 3 months, I didn't thereabouts. I didn't. I say 3 months, 2 to 3 months. I can't give you exact numbers, but I know how many masses I went to, in that time and everything. But anyway, about 2 to 3 months went by, and I heard nothing. Didn't hear anything about it or hear anything from her. Now, in my day job at the time, I was working in the Arts District of Atlanta. And there's a we call it the Arts District. There's it's where the museum is and everything, the High Museum. There's a subway line that is, or one of the MARTA stops on the subway line is called the Arts Center Station. So everyone refers to it as the Arts District or Arts Center and that kind of thing. I was working in that area, and there was a Borders Books and Music. This was, I know, showing my age. This was back when that was a thing. There's a Borders Books and Music near my work, so I would regularly, near my office, so I would regularly go there for lunch. And go there, and by the way, Seattle's best has always been and it will always be a better coffee shop than Starbucks. I don't even drink coffee, but they have better bagels, they have better tea, all of that. If you see me with a Starbucks mug, it is only because I am making the best of a bad situation. But anyway, so I go in there one day, and this girl walks by, and bear in mind, I've not seen this woman in months, and I only was with her one day, and I've only seen her I haven't seen her in months. And this woman walks by, and I thought for a minute, wait a minute, was that her? And so she was working at she was at one of the cash registers, and I realized, oh, she's working there. And I went up to her, and I said, excuse me, are you name of person that I spoke to I spoke to at Mass a while back? And she just smiles and nods and looks away from me. I said, am I bothering you? And she smiles and, like this. I said, okay, I'm sorry, have a nice day. And I left. Again, I didn't think anything of that. These are kind of awkward situations, happen all the time. So that Sunday was Mass, and I go there, and at one point, a friend of mine, the same friend that had gotten me interested in this, he and I were sitting out in front of the location where they had Mass, the place where the temple was and everything, or the chapel, if you want to use that terminology, was. And we were sitting out front talking, and this guy who I talked about, the one who I did not know had been love bombing me, came out, and he asked to speak to me alone. And okay, and so my friend went inside, and he asked me, he said, and I remember I jokingly said, am I in trouble? Like, I jokingly, I didn't think that I was. And he says, well, and he had some concerns. And first he presented two things to me that were absolute malarkey. I didn't think of them as malarkey then. I just thought they were genuine misunderstandings. First, he told me that he believed that I was stealing people away from this organization to start my own occult group. That was the first thing. It was very odd, and I thought about that, and I said, well, I tried to think about what he could be referring to, and I said, well, there was a thing recently. There had been a guy there that had come to Mass who had asked me, he and I were both in the arts and entertainment industry, and he wanted to start a ritual group dedicated to a West African deity called Zango, that was a deity of, I believe, a Santorian deity that was part of the a god of the arts and the entertainment industry, and we could do this together. It'd be fun to do. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And I told a friend of mine, that same friend I mentioned, I told him about it, and we talked about the idea. It seemed cool. And I mean, at the same time, it's really not something that's appropriate for him to stop us from doing. There were no rules saying we couldn't do it or something. And again, bear in mind, I was not even an official member of this group. So and neither was that guy. So there's really, I don't know if that was it, but that was the only thing I could think of. And at the same time, this would be kind of like, if you're going to a Christian church and the priest came and said, hey, I hear you're trying to start an independent Bible study group. That's not okay. That kind of thing. So that was odd. So I asked him if it was that it, and that didn't really do anything for him, and or didn't really satisfy him. He just kind of let it go. And I realized in retrospect, he was looking for things he could hang on me, like things that would get under my skin. He said that there was some concern about me acting like I was more of a part of the organization than I actually was, like I was some official person within the organization. I, again, did not know what he was referring to. Later, a person gave me an answer. One of his official people gave me one answer, suggestion of something that might have been, which was that there was a guy that came to Mass at one time a few months ago that had asked me a question, and I had answered his question with incorrect information. Now, the thing there was just that he kept asking me he had been following me around trying to get me to answer this, and I kept telling him I don't know. And this is one of the problems, by the way, when you're involved with an organization where people keep secrets and pretend and play pretend that they don't know what you're talking about. And part of the process of getting involved in the organization is, staying after these people until you give them what they want. This is part of the problem with doing bullshit like that, is eventually they're not going to be able. It's kind of like, it's kind of like I've had experiences where I'm like, someone assumes because of my hair and my clothes, they think that I must be a drug dealer or something. So they come up to me and start bothering me, trying to get them to sell them drugs. And I keep telling them, no, I'm not a drug dealer. And they won't take no for an answer, because they assume because that is what any drug dealer will do, is pretend not to be, to, see how much you really want it, and that you're not, it's that kind of, and that you're not a police officer and all that shit. It's that same thing. Like when your whole thing is about secrecy, you really can't complain when misinformation gets shared. But anyway, I had eventually tried to answer that guy's question and gotten it wrong. So that might have been what he was referring to. And, yeah, I mean, I can own that. It was a mistake. None of this was really clicking. So he tried something, and he had prefaced this before he made even those accusations. He'd prefaced this with some concerns about women, and his concerns that I was using the organization as a place to go meet women. And, I mean, like, and not take that, I wasn't taking it seriously. I was just using it as an opportunity to meet women. And I mean, I owned part of that. I was like, yeah, it's a social opportunity for me. It'd be nice to meet somebody that has these same interests, but but I do take it seriously. And so then he got down to the meat of it, and this is where he really sank his teeth in. He said, do you know, and he became very focused and very accusatory, and he said, and it's difficult to describe if you've not been on the end of a narcissist that's really targeting you with an accusation. There's a sense of, I didn't know he was a narcissist at the time. I didn't know very much about narcissism then. Like a lot of people, I thought narcissism, and by the way, I should clarify here, I am the one asserting that he is a narcissist. This is part of why I'm not identifying anybody. I am asserting that he's a narcissist. That was not like an official diagnosis that was made or something. But anyway, so he just fits all the signs, and you have to be on the lookout. And it's the kind of person he's the kind of person that I'm always on the lookout for now, whether they're officially diagnosed or not. But I should clarify that. Anyway, but if you've ever been on the receiving end of narcissistic abuse, when they are about to get inside your head, when they shift gears, there is something snake-like in their eyes, the way that their demeanor changes. And he said, "Are you aware that you use your size and your loud voice to bully women?" And I was like, I was taken aback, but I immediately now, this is where I was still in the mindset of apologizing for autism. I was automatically like, if I screwed up, I would explain to people, I'm sorry, I'm on the spectrum. I didn't mean to bother you this way. Most people will accept that and go on. But this is what I went into. I said, well, this is something, I'm on the autism spectrum, and so I'll have problems like I might speak too loudly, or I might stand too close to somebody, or I might seem like I don't care about what they're saying when I do, or I'm not listening, that kind of thing. I started with that, and I tried to explain that, and he said, very dryly, he said, well, name of person, the woman that I was mentioning, he said, she got in touch with me and told me that you came into her place of business and harassed her. And I said, and I explained the situation as I explained it to you now. And I said, I certainly didn't mean anything by it, and I'm sorry if I was, I didn't mean anything by it, and I'm sorry if I was out of line, and and again, bear in mind, once again, I'm not officially in this organization. She's not officially in this organization. It was very bizarre to me because, it's obvious why this is all bizarre, but anyway, it was very odd to me. And so, but I still didn't register it as much of as like a big problem. I was just very taken aback that she would contact him. It's kind of like, if you have a problem with that, if you have a problem with the way I'm behaving at your place of business, tell your manager, tell security or something like that. The idea that you would contact the head of my church, my religious organization that I'm a part of, was very bizarre. That's like, that was very bizarre already. But I tried to be as respectful as I could, and he went on and he said, well, he kept pushing this thing. He said, you've been observed doing a lot of things that are unacceptable with women here. And I was trying to think about, now, you have to understand, this was a place that had very libertine attitudes about sexuality, and people, there was a lot of swinging going on, a lot of polyamory, and a lot of hooking up. And I was trying to figure out what he was talking about. There was one woman there that I knew about that she had come in one day and walked straight into the room. I had been sitting on a couch. This was like an hour or so before the service started, but I'd known her and been talking to her and everything. And we had a really good rapport. I remember she said she wanted me to meet her son at one point, because he was a aspiring, teenage musician, wanted me to meet someone that was actually doing it and everything. But I remember one day she came in and she just walked right up to me and took me by the face and kissed me with tongue and walked off. And later that day, a little while later, I saw her again and we started talking. And she was sitting in a chair and I was sitting, squatted down on my knees, my arms on my knees like this, talking to her. And I said something, well, that was kind of nice earlier. And she said, yeah. And I said, yeah, can we do it again? And she said, sure. And we started kissing, making out, and we were kissing and making out right there. And some other person that came up and said, is this your husband? And she said, no, he's my hoe. And she was officially married to somebody outside the organization. I did not give a shit about things like that at the time. But anyway, and that continued for a little while longer. She messaged me after a certain point and just said she just wanted to be friends. She wanted to stop the physical thing. And I said, sure. And we left it at that. And this was like all of this long before we got to this issue we're at now. So I was trying to think about, well, was it that? And he said, no. And he stopped me. He said, what I want to do is and I was getting really uncomfortable with this, the way he was bearing down on me. It was this thing of like, the way he was talking to me, and obviously I can't reconstruct the whole conversation, but it was a feeling like, it was like, I felt like a rat in a maze, a mouse in a maze, and like every time I would find a corner that seemed to be leading out of the maze, a new barrier would be put down, and I kept getting boxed in and boxed in this very, like, when people actually have a problem with each other and they want to solve a problem with each other, they sit down and they talk about it. They talk it out, or they work through an intermediary. Like here, this could have been handled differently, but it was this very weird thing where I was not being told. I was told that he told me that there were all of these women at the church that were mad at me, and that I'd upset most of the women there, if not all of them, with my behavior. But he wouldn't tell me what this behavior was, and I tried. This other woman here was the only one I'd had any kind of physical interaction with, and so I kept. You sure it's not her? What are we talking about? I kept going on with this because I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and again, it just had this feeling like a mouse in a maze of like, rather than moving me to a place of clarity where I could understand, he was like, I felt like these barriers were just being put up everywhere I went, and I was having trouble thinking. And this was really, I think he realized he was getting to me at this point, because I was going into autistic shutdown mode, where I'm just kind of like withdrawing into myself. And it's like, shutdown is different from meltdown. Meltdown is like when you see the autistic people that are hedgehogging on the floor and covering their heads and screaming and everything. That's meltdown. I don't do that. Or at least not since I was very little. But I was hitting shutdown, which shutdown is just like, I'm going into like, it's almost exactly what it sounds like. It's like you're a robot and you're being put in standby mode or something. Like everything was shutting down and I was withdrawing into myself. And I think he saw that was happening and he was getting what he wanted. And so finally he said, what I want us to do going forward is we're going to establish a gesture, a hand gesture of some kind that I can do whenever your behavior's out of line, so that you know when it's time to withdraw. Now, even in all of this, even in all of that, as I'm shutting down, I just knew something's not right about this. Like, people who want you to be accountable for something tell you what they want you to be accountable for. This felt very, I may be on the spectrum, but I do have, but I did even then have a basic understanding of things like stranger danger and, certain patterns of toxic behavior and all of that. And this was very much feeling like somebody that was not, there was so much here that I wasn't getting. But at the same time, what was taking me over and where I was going into shutdown mode was not just how tenacious and persistent he was being with me, but how embarrassed and ashamed I was, because you have to remember, I trusted this guy. I really trusted this guy and thought he was really cool and had all of this respect for him. And he was, I was trusting him and I was wanting to believe him as he's telling me all of these things. And I was like, I need to leave. I need to go. And I just got up and left. And he said something about, well, if you don't take, maybe you need to take be willing to take meaningful action to change your life for the better, or something like that. I left. Now, I got, once I got home and left for the day and didn't attend Mass. And once I got home, I went and sat down and I sent him an email, got his email information from a friend, and sent him an email explaining my whole situation, and explaining my situation, and like, this is who I am, and I went in on at length. I still have the email, but it's incredibly long. No one has ever accused me of being short-winded. But I sent him this email explaining everything about me, and like, I'm very sorry. I swear I didn't mean anything by it, over and over again. Didn't get anything back. So I went and that Monday, when I was on my lunch break, I went over to the bookstore where I worked, or next to where I worked, or up the road from where I worked, and I asked to speak to the manager. And the manager came down, and I explained the situation. And the manager said, "Well, uh, this one, the name of person in question, has actually been having some very problems with erratic behavior lately, and some problems with the way she's interacted with customers, similar to what you're talking about. And so, she's going to be taking a leave of absence to focus on, she was going to get fired. She was going to get fired. She's going to be taking a leave of absence to focus on, her getting herself worked out. You are a good customer and you are certainly welcome to come here anytime." And I said, "Thank you." And I left. And so I messaged him with that. And I said, this does make me feel like it's the problem, since there are these other customers. This makes me feel like the problem was not was not with me after all. So I'm still working off the position of this is all a big misunderstanding, not this is somebody that's trying to manipulate me. And so he responded, and he sent me this message that his was long as well, but I've still got it. He sent me this message that said, he said, "Look, it's he went on, told me that he accused me of saying that, he said, 'You think you're going to win this argument by telling me something I don't know about you or don't understand about you, but what you're not counting on is the fact that I understand you all too well.'" And so again, this is, this is, at this point, not to sound dramatic, but at this point, it's starting to sound like Charles Manson talking to the Manson family or something. It's getting ridiculous. But he says, "You think," and he says, "You seem to think that you won the argument when all you've done is made it. All you've done is guaranteed that you'll never be welcome here again." And he said, "How dare you?" I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, "How dare you go to her place of employment and get her fired, and the fact that you would come to me and rejoice in the fact that you got her fired and celebrate getting her fired, it tells me that you really are this misogynistic piece of shit," whatever is exactly like that in that vein. He said, "This is bullshit. You can go fuck yourself." And of course, in subsequent correspondence, he would tell me that he didn't give me permission to do that. Again, who the hell are you to tell me that there's nothing in the charter of this organization that says you get to control me in this manner? Anyway, so he went on in this vein, but then he said, and he said, "And don't think that I'm talking about," referring to the other woman, the woman I made out with. He said, "Don't think this is about her, because I have a relationship with her and you don't." And I was like, oh, okay, so we've got some jealousy happening here. And this is pretty obvious. I mean, you've got this guy that is, this guy that's definitely, I don't know how old he was, but he was definitely in the third act of life. And he's, there's a younger, dare I say, better looking young man, especially in my earlier years, now that's threatening his territory. So I got that from the fact that he was bringing her up, like, don't think this is about her. Like, we weren't talking about her. I didn't say, we weren't talking about her. I tried to clarify that that's not, I didn't, that if that was it. But you're bringing this up now and literally saying, don't think it's because I have a relationship with her. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. Don't think about a pink elephant. Yeah, now you kind of made it obvious that you're what's really going on here. And he told me, he said, it's not just about her or either of these women. He said, "I have a list of at least 6 women that you've exhibited inappropriate behavior in front of, and no, I won't tell you who they are so that you can just deny it." And this was now I'm starting to worry, because the thing is, there's only about a dozen people, male or female, that came to this thing on a regular basis in the first place. Maybe between, maybe a little more than a dozen, maybe about 15 or 16. So it's like, if there were 6 people that were put out with me, 6 people would have constituted the majority of the women that came to this thing regularly. So if 6 people are put out with me, surely even I would know something was amiss. And so, he kept going on in this vein about how I wasn't doing anything to improve my life. And he said, I remember he used a metaphor. He said, you can't run from your legs, that kind of thing. Said I wasn't doing anything to meaningfully improve my life, and that I was unwilling to confront. And I was unwilling to really introspect. But now I'm really concerned because there's 6 people, he says, that have a problem with me. And I tell you, I sat there like going over in my mind, like every memory I had of anything that had ever happened with any person. And I was concerned. So that friend I mentioned that I got his email from, she and I had a minor disagreement about something. And I had, it was a minor thing, and we had, brushed up on it and moved on. It was not a problem anymore. But I reached out to her and I said, he says there's 6 women I've pissed off. Is this one of them? And he comes back at me and says, you don't have permission to talk to her. You don't talk to her. You don't have permission to talk to her. And so I'm sitting here trying to figure out what he's referring to. And I thought about one situation that occurred to me. I had a situation with a woman who was like a friend of some people in this organization. She was in our social, our larger social circle that I had like a few weeks prior to this, maybe 3 weeks or so prior to this exchange that we were having. I'd had an argument with her where I'd said something that really pissed her off. And by the way, I do take responsibility. I don't want to go into it. That's a whole other thing. But I do take responsibility for it. I was the one that needed to say I'm sorry in that. Again, this was already a settled issue. So, and I had, this was already a settled issue. So I was thinking like, is that what he's referring to? But then I stopped and realized, as long as he's not telling me what it is, anything I say to him, he just can say, aha, see, that was it. I told you, I knew you'd figure it out eventually, because this is just Barnum level, sucker born every minute bullshit. And again, this is what I realized about the whole occult thing. When the whole thing's about keeping secrets and, goading people to improve themselves by, by withholding knowledge and stuff, you're just setting up, there's no level of accountability that can make that sort of thing work. You're just setting up for people to be manipulated and mistreated, and it just doesn't work. So anyway, but I was very concerned about all of this, and he told me, don't email me again until you're ready to do some serious introspection. I reached out, the woman I talked about that I mentioned, that I had made out with, and had kind of a brief physical flirtation with. I reached out to her and again asked, as respectfully as I could, I'd appreciate, I said, like, if I've done something wrong, I would appreciate it if you tell me. This is very, very concerning to me. And that was the language I used. And he came back at me and said, how dare you say that she can only speak to you? I didn't say anything of the sort. I went back over the message and no, there's nothing of the sort in there. And so this is getting, the effect that this was having on me, tremendous anxiety, tremendous, negative physical responses to this treatment. And I was getting a lot more paranoid, and like, if I had any reason to be in the general area of where this was meeting, where this organization was meeting, like if I needed to go to a shop or something in that area, I was always on guard and very, like heart beating fast, very paranoid that I'm going to run into this guy and he's going to fixate on me with that glare and start accusing me of things. And like, the feeling was like I had a vice clamp on my head or my brain, and he was just tightening it and getting joy out of tightening it was the feeling. And I was just afraid I was going to run into him and see this. And I was getting really paranoid about it. And I am like trying desperately to figure out what it is that I've done that's pissed people off. Because even though I was not able to trust him at this point and knew I couldn't trust him at this point, I was still working off of the assumption that there was something legitimate here. So the next mass came around and I went. And I walked in that door and I was greeted warmly. He was not there yet. I arrived before the thing and I was, greeted warmly by everybody there. We hung out. We were talking like old friends. Like, in many cases, we were friends at that point. We are talking like friends, enjoying, like tea and hors d'oeuvres before the mass and everything like that. And it was all very chill and relaxed. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong. And I'm like looking around at these people. We're laughing and joking and talking like we always did. And I'm looking around at these people. By the way, this is coming up on an hour that I've been doing this. And if my phone is suddenly full and I need to stop it, there will be, and continue, there will be a part 2, just letting you know if it cuts off quickly. But anyway, so I'm looking at all of this, and this was very strange. I'm thinking about this, like, what is going on? And this guy who was kind of his second in command took me aside and was just talking to me. We were just having a conversation, and he wasn't really addressing anything with me concerning, but he kind of caught me in a corner and we were chatting some and everything. And he seemed concerned. I was getting a feeling that there was something on his mind. And so this guy who was the head of the organization, the head of this local organization that I'm talking about, he came in and he came up to me and he said, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Look, I'm not going to discuss this right now. We have the mass is about to start, and you're just creating bad energy in here. Your energy is really bad." And I said, "I don't feel like I'm putting out bad energy. Everyone seems happy to see me." And he said, "Look, man, I'm not going to talk to you about this. You need to leave." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because it's my organization, and I don't owe you a goddamn explanation. That's why." And now at this point, he's making a scene. And he managed to, I was really embarrassed. And he's, at that point, he threatened to call the cops. So I just, okay, fine, I'm out of here. And so I left. And, that was when that particular, the underling of his that I'm referring to, talked to me outside for a little bit. And that was when I got the information about the incorrect, or the observation about the incorrect information I'd given that guy and everything, that was what that might have been. And I was just like, what I didn't realize, again, like I said, you cannot legitimately go into one of these like occult secret society type organizations and expect to get a straight answer. You have to give yourself over to them completely and just do everything they tell you to do without fail. And this, this could have been, this could have been some, I was starting to wonder if this could have been some elaborate initiation ritual or something like that. But anyway, the guy, I was really embarrassed at that point. I actually was fighting back, starting to cry, and I left the mass again that day, never to return. Now, some interesting things happened. About a year went by. And during that time, some interesting things started to happen. First of all, now he had told me not to, he had told me that there would be, he was making threats of like legal repercussions for me if I spoke to anyone from mass, from the organization again. Like he was threatening legal action against me if I talked to them. And so I, and little did I know, obviously there was, there was nothing. You can't take legal action against somebody for having a one-to-one conversation, an agreeable one-to-one conversation with someone else. Like, you just can't do it unless you're their legal guardian. But I started thinking about it, and I started looking at some of the things he was saying. I started realizing that this guy really was kind of a pervert. And I say, like, for example, I had played, he had asked me to play guitar at a public service, a public ceremony that they were doing at this local business. He had asked me to play guitar while they read the sacred information, everything, the sacred text. And so I was doing that and playing, haunting music in the background. And at that event was this girl that introduced me, this adult woman who introduced me, introduced herself to me as his daughter. And so okay, your daughter. And we spoke for a minute, and we talked. And so later, at the next time I saw him, I said, "It was nice meeting your daughter, by the way." And he said, Oh, she's not actually my daughter. She's actually a woman that he said that she was actually a woman that he was fucking, and they had decided they needed to figure out the official nature of their relationship, so he decided to legally adopt her and she would be his legal daughter, but she was not related to him. She was an adult he was fucking, and they did this for some reason. And a lot of weird stuff like that. One of the things he said in the message was, he was trying to give me some advice in one of his private communications to me, and he told me, and this was in the midst of all the heated anger and everything, he told me that one of the things I needed to understand was that the gods and goddesses that were working on my behalf were probably not. One of the reasons I was struggling with women was because the gods and goddesses that were working working in the spirit realm on my behalf did not want me to focus on that. They wanted me to focus on my music, and I should focus on my music rather than women and stop. He said that maybe music is your God. The problem is that music is your God, and she doesn't like that you're betraying her, and that's why you're, having this problem. And then he went on and said this, I shit you not. He said, he named some esoteric deity or something, said, this person is my God, and for that reason, I'm cursed to never be able to find one partner. To worship my God, I have to have sex with as many partners as possible. Oh, so you've got a divinely ordained reason to be a lecherous old man. Good to know. So that was, I went on with my life. I cut ties with everybody, including my friends, my friend that had brought me into it. I cut ties with everybody there. Now that I was, being threatened with legal action. And so much so that I actually saw one of those friends from that organization. I saw her a few months later when I went to see Nightwish at the Masquerade here in Atlanta. And by the way, if you're going to ask me how Nightwish was live, it was while Annette Olzone was in the band. I'm sure she's a lovely human being. I mean her no harm, but God, she sounded terrible. And it was like listening to Minnie Mouse on helium. Floor Jansen is the best singer they've ever had, and I am so glad that she's in that band because she's awesome. But Annette Olzone sounded fucking terrible. Anyway, that was Nightwish. But I was there to see Nightwish, and I saw one of my friends from this group, and I didn't say anything to her because I was afraid of what reprisals would get me, would be coming my way. I used the eyes wide shut metaphor before. I was literally thinking, like, am I going to come home and find a mask on my bed? That kind of thing. Like, I was wondering what was, I didn't want to keep poking at the weird, creepy occult society thing and finding out how far that rabbit hole was going to go. Okay, next thing that happened was that, and bear with me, it gets better. Next thing that happened was at one point my band was playing the band I was in at the time was playing at a local venue, and we were one of these bands that was, the Corpse Paint and Satan and all of that stuff. And so we were one of those bands. We were playing at this local venue, and I finished the set, and I went outside in front of the venue, and there's this guy out there smoking, and I noticed that he had a tattoo that was a symbol from that organization, and I asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, I used to go to mass there." But he named specific person, this exact guy that I was having these problems with. He named this person and said he was as I went there, but then at one point he made it clear to me how wrong and how off my behavior was, and that I needed to really take some time away from the organization to grow as a person before I would be welcome back. And I thought, okay, so this is part of this is something that's done. This is a regular thing. Like I said, I had even started to wonder if this was some kind of initiation. And so I thought, okay, so this is part of a thing. And he said, I've been doing a lot of really important introspective work, and I've finally gotten to a place where he will speak to me again, and I can come back and he's finally willing to welcome me back as a part of the organization. And I did all this internal work learning about myself, and I just said, good for you, man, and went back inside. Because at this point now, now I've realized, like I said, I'm on the spectrum. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a rube. And I had realized, okay, so this is what he does. This is the process. Now I know this is how this works. Okay. The next thing that happened, a full year, a full calendar year and more went by, and a few months more went by with this, after this organization had happened. Now, before I had abandoned everybody altogether, one of my friends had mentioned to me that there was some talk among the top brass, like the actual like national board of directors of the whole nationwide organization. We're actually talking about calling this guy to the carpet. They had some concerns about his behavior. Now this is where it gets juicy. But I left all those people behind before I found out what the resolution of that was. So more than a year goes by, and I get this call, text message, actually it was an email, but I get messaged by a friend of mine, actually the same friend that I had seen at the Nightwish show, and I was invited to the solstice, this like solstice related ceremony. It was a party. It was a public party at a public gallery, and but I was invited to this thing, and I was like, okay, well, this is out of the blue. And I said, well, I thought I'm not supposed to be talking to you. And she explained, and now she explained a little bit, and then I was able to reach out to all of my other friends and talk to them and finally find out what had been going on. Okay. So she had said, she told me that after I was kicked out of the organization, she had gone to him and said, she said, I do not like the way you handled the thing with Jordan. I don't think you were fair to him. And so he put her on what was known as bad report. Like, if you don't take, if you were, if you're disrespectful to the organization, if you're an official member and you're disrespectful to the head of the organization and all that, you could go on bad report. So he put her on that. She left, not wanting to return. On top of that, my friend who had gotten me into the organization in the first place was not happy with the way he had behaved and had left the organization, never to return. On top of that, this guy had also started railing against Satanism because he, LaVeyan Satanism, because he thought that was a part of why I was being so difficult. And this friend of mine was a Satanist too. He's like, well, if you've got a problem with Satanism, you've got a problem with me. He picked up and left. And then this husband-wife that actually technically outranked him in the degrees of the organization and everything, they were above him. They left. They were disgusted with what he had done, and they left. So I had caused this mass exodus of people. Now, like I said, there's only about a dozen or so people that even come to this thing. So most of the organization, most of the people that were a part of the organization or hated his guts, packed up and left the whole thing, and it was like barely anybody was there at that point. And so at that point, the larger directors of the whole like nationwide organization and everything, they got involved. They called him to the carpet. Found out, this is what I was told. Obviously, I wasn't there to hear the whole thing, but this is what I was told, was that one, there had been some embezzling issues. There had been some financial issues where he was maybe not very dishonest. Maybe he was not very honest about, financial disclosures and everything with them. And so he had been, that was certainly a call for discipline, on top of the fact that there had been numerous, and I mean numerous, sexual harassment complaints against him. And so I realized, I started to think, okay, so he was probably looking for someone to be his fall guy at this point. But anyway, there had been numerous sexual harassment complaints against him. And so everybody had left this organization, and he had gotten busted by the top brass and kicked out. He was kicked out. And if he wanted to come back, it was like if he wanted to come back, he would have to start over as a new recruit, a new member, and work his way back up through the levels again. They kicked him the hell out and put somebody else in charge. Actually put the guy that was the underling of his that had spoken to me that day, they put him in charge of it, which actually I think is better. He's a much nicer and more pleasant person to be around. But anyway, So I asked so my friend was telling me what happened was we all left and we started our own organization to observe the same spiritual practices and everything. We just started our own organization. And I said, well, if I come to this party, this event, this service, I said, is he going to be there? And she said, no, of course not. We told him he was specifically informed not to show up at this event. He's not welcome. And so I came back and I went back to this whole thing. And I went, or I came back, not came back, I went to this event and everybody was there. Everybody was happy to see me, as always. There were a couple of people there that were like, you know, those like, again, those underlings that had worked directly underneath him in maintaining the organization. They were a little surprised to see me, but they were very pleasant and friendly and treated me just fine and everything. And we all, and so I talked to these women. I made it a point to go talk to the women at this thing that I had not seen in over a year. And I said, yeah, he told me that if I contacted any of you, he was going to take legal action against me. And it's like, no, he laughed. It's like, no, he can't do that. They explained to me in depth what had actually gone on. He was this creep. He was this pervert. And so we all laughed about it. One of the women, one of the women that was there ended up, this was her initiation, or she initiated this, not me. She sat in my lap most of the evening and made out with me. So I left feeling a lot better and feeling very positive about the whole thing. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention this. He had actually, I had made, this is, 16 some odd years ago that this happened. So back then, or maybe a little later than that, but I had made, before we had this whole reconciliation with everybody, I had made a video on my channel at the time. It's not available anymore, but it was a video on my channel at the time, similar to this, talking. I had been, this organization had been, or occultism had been a part of my life. And so I'd made a video talking about this falling out that I'd had without naming names, just like I'd done just now. And he messaged me on my YouTube channel, he had messaged me on my YouTube channel and started berating me about this shit on there, even though I didn't say anything to identify him. And I remember going and looking at the channel, and the channel, this was, the channel had been started like minutes before the post had been made. Like he clearly made this channel to come after me, and just being a complete asshole and everything. And he tried to start the same accusations and the same bullying shit up and everything. And then, and my viewership at the time just really let him have it. And I'm usually not I'm not in favor of that kind of dogpiling in principle, but at that time it was totally justified, just piranha that guy. And anyway, so I had this great night, and I went home that night and I reached out to him on social media and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I was specially invited to that party that you were specifically told not to come to, and the women who you were actually being inappropriate towards told me so much about what had happened and what had really happened, and we all had a big laugh at your expense. And he blocked me. And and I'm going to say something right now to that guy, like I'll speak to you directly. If by some random chance you should see this video and you feel like commenting, you stay the fuck out of my life. And I am not anywhere near as naive as I was back then. I am a lot more with it and a lot more together as a person. And I will not tolerate any garbage from you, period. You stay the fuck out. I'm not going to say what's going to happen or make threats or anything like that, but you stay the fuck out of my life. You do not get back in my life, and you are not going to be able to get an edge on me ever again. Anyway, this has been just the story itself has been going on for over an hour, and you're probably wanting to say to me, well, Jordan, don't you feel vindicated by all of that? To some extent, yes. Yeah, I do. I mean, this was something that had really been bothering me. One, because I really wanted to be a part of this organization. I really liked the friends I was making there, and I certainly had no intention of upsetting anybody or anything like that. And this was someone who I had trusted and who had tried very hard to manipulate me, and someone who turned out himself to be a lecherous old man. And I bring all of this up to get to the point of the matter, to get to the point of it, that narcissism, again, this is, obviously there's better resources about autism and narcissistic abuse from actual professionals on this whole thing, this matter, that can give you better insights into how to deal with it. But I wanted to bring all of this up as an example to point out that there are things you really need to learn as an autistic person. And it seems like everybody goes to dating probably because that sounds like it's the most fun and the most exciting and all of that. But there's so many things about interaction you need to learn. And even neurotypical people are not properly schooled in how to handle narcissistic abusers. He would not be the last narcissistic abuser that I would encounter in my life. Again, I don't want to say anything to name names because these are all people that I want to move on from and not deal with again. But sometime after that, I had a day job. In fact, quite a while after that, I had a day job where it became, I let my boss know, someone I thought I could trust, let him know that I was on the spectrum and that I was dealing with this, that, and the other issue. And he immediately started teasing me and mistreating me because of it. Knowing exactly what I was dealing with, he started doing things like walking up behind me and startling me, and doing things where I would, I would be put on the spot and be made to feel startled and confronted and everything. Like one time, I had, like, we were, the place where I was working was closed for the day, and I happened to be the last one leaving because I was using the restroom. And so I walked out, maybe 15 minutes after it was supposed to close, and he was standing there by my car with everybody that I worked with standing next to him. And he said, "Hey, we were just waiting to find out how your poop went." And that was like a constant thing. If I came out of the bathroom, he wanted to ask, just constantly wanted to know, would ask me questions like that. Something he did at one point, I went to sleep on a couch in the upstairs break room. Like, this was out of the way of anything. I had nothing to do. I had an extended block at my job where I had nothing to do. It was a break. I was on break, and I was reading a book on the couch upstairs, and I fell asleep, not meaning to. But he came into that room and woke me up by screaming at me at the absolute top of his lungs. And I shot up like this, and I was immediately, now I really was dealing with, meltdown, with panic. Like, I was like this, like terrified, and he just goes, "Hey," and walked off from that. Like, put me in panic mode. And then he took the security camera footage of me having that, not just him yelling at me, but me having that embarrassing reaction to it. He took that security camera footage and put it on the company Instagram with a voiceover dub from his wife that said, "And that's why you don't fall asleep on the job." And he actually put that up there on the company Instagram to shame me. I went to his wife the next day and said, "I want that taken down." And she said, "Okay," and took it off. I think she, better than him, understood what a HR nightmare that was going to be if it stayed up. But something I've had to learn is to be vigilant towards those kind of people, because narcissists, and those are not the only two, and sadly they were not the only two, and they won't be the last. But narcissistic people know how to, narcissistic people who get off, you can always see a narcissist, because you can always detect a narcissist, because if you're feeling uncomfortable or unsure about something, and they start to kind of think they start to kind of this, smirk, like they think it's funny, there's something funny going on that you don't get, there's a joke that you don't get, that's really a great way that I've learned to identify that behavior. But autistic people are magnets for narcissistic abuse. And if you're an autistic person, you've got to learn everything you can about it, because you will be a magnet for these kind of people. And so it's with any person I deal with. Am I dealing with a narcissist is at the forefront of my mind until I know them well and I know that I can trust them. And one of my personal problems is I'm too trusting of people. I jump in with people too quickly. I have to be more careful about that. Another thing was interesting. There was a YouTuber, an autistic YouTuber, who did a commentary on one of my videos recently. I'd actually like to respond to some of the things he said more directly. It was, I don't want to say his name wrong. I can't think of it right now, but I actually really enjoyed the commentary. He was not being derisive or anything like that. It was a very thoughtful and enjoyable commentary, and I really liked it. And he said he'd like to have me on his channel, which is something I'm happy to do, on his podcast. But anyway, he was talking about it, and one of the things he was concerned about was that, I seem to have some very rigid ideas about men interacting with women and things like that. And that's another thing that I wanted to get to in all of this, is that, where did that come from? Well, growing up, I believed that I kind of, grew up with a very liberal family, and I really believed the idea that men and women are fundamentally the same and don't, and they don't, you shouldn't act any different around women than you do around men. If you do, it's sexist and demeaning, and treat women exactly the same way you treat men and all of that. And I really bit into that. And the thing is, neurotypical people don't have a problem with that, I think, because they don't fully get into, when they're talking about that, they're not fully embracing the implications of that. They're talking about, on a fundamental basic level, don't do things like hold back a qualified applicant for a job because she's a woman, things like that. I get that. That's what they're talking about. And that's all I agree with that. That's all reasonable. I agree with that. But what they don't understand is that ultimately there are these natural things that, men and women do in interacting with each other, these natural deferences that they make, and men are automatically thought of as shitheels and schmendricks if they don't observe these basic rules. And this is something that's very conscious to me. And so as I think about that, as I keep that in mind, I grew up with that, and my thinking is like, okay, so in my attitude towards how I approach women, I can approach it with an unfettered liberal attitude and get yelled at and get misunderstood. Or I can approach it with an attitude of moderate conservatism and get along with everybody. So that's what I find myself doing. My attitudes about that seem to run slightly afoul of what more progressive people would like to think about gender relations and that kind of thing. But keeping these things in the forefront of my mind and how I interact with people helps me get along better in the world. It's kind of like years ago, I don't want to dredge things up, so I'll keep things anonymous again. But years ago, I had generated some negativity for some things I'd said about a female YouTuber. I was talking privately to another, and no, this is not anyone you've heard of. I feel like every time I have to emphasize, this is not an invitation for you to start guessing at who these people are. It's annoying because someone always starts guessing. But anyway, it's not anyone you would heard of, but I was talking to another YouTuber privately who was taking me to task on it, and he said, well, you sound misogynistic because you called her a fucking asshole. And I said, well, I've said, I think fucking asshole was the exact thing. It was something that was insulting and vulgar and insulting without bringing gender into it, like gendered language into it. Obviously, I would understand if I'd called her a cunt or a bitch or a hoe or something. That would have made sense as misogynistic sounding. But what I was saying to him was, I said, okay, I've said I called her a fucking asshole. I've said that, all of that and more, to male YouTubers, and no one has a problem with it. It's just part of it. And this was a guy I was talking to, was this very liberal, very this very liberal, progressive-minded person, and he said, "Well, I guess it's just a little different when you talk to women." Yeah, it is. And those are the kind of lessons I'm willing to learn. I'm certainly willing to learn lessons that will help me interact with the world better. I'm not going to learn weird, mysterious, occult lessons where I just feel like a scared, terrified little piece of shit for no reason. But ultimately, yeah, neurotypical progressive people are not thinking about are not thinking about those automatic things, the things they do automatically when they interact with women, like men interact with women and women interact with men. They're not thinking about that whole unspoken language when they say men and women are men and women are fundamentally the same, and you treat them the same way. Not really. You should be decent to everybody. You should be compassionate and empathetic to everybody. You should not hold people back because of their gender. You should not try to restrict their advancement in life because of their gender. I agree with all of those things. But fundamentally, men and women don't talk, do not interact the same way. Don't get me wrong. There are cases where men and women know each other so well that they just say whatever the hell they want, or they act however the hell they want with those specific people. But that's a cultivated relationship. Fundamentally, men and women, if they don't have a long-standing cultivated relationship with each other, there is a degree of formality that is expected between men and women. And for God's sake, don't get involved with any organization that pretends to throw all of that shit out the window. Have a nice night.